my mother stole $6,500 from my inheritance to pay for her stepkids. Years later, she asked me for $1,500 a month for their college. But when I said no, her husband abandoned her and drained her retirement savings. I'm 24 years old. I work in marketing in the Midwest. And I need to tell this story because basically my mother destroyed whatever relationship we could have had when she decided that her new husband and his kids were more important than me. And the worst part of it all is that she stole from me. Literally stole from me, and then had the audacity to ask me for money years later like nothing had happened. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was like 16, and my mom, Pamela, met Vincent. Before Vincent, my mom and I were fine. I mean, we weren't super close or anything, but things worked, you know? It was just the two of us. After my dad left us when I was like 8, my mom worked a ton, like night shift nurse, and I was pretty independent even as a kid. We had our routine, our little traditions, like watching movies on Sundays and making pancakes on Saturday mornings. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And then Vincent showed up with his 2 kids, Lindsay and Nathan, and everything changed so fast, I didn't even have time to process it. Vincent was one of those guys who at first seemed super charming, you know, always smiling, making jokes, bringing flowers to my mom. But there was something about him that didn't sit right with me from the beginning. I don't know. Maybe it was the way he looked at my mom. Like he was evaluating her, calculating something. His kids, Lindsay was 14 and Nathan like 12 at the time, were, well, let's say they were very spoiled. Lindsay was one of those girls who always needed to be the center of attention, and Nathan basically didn't do anything around the house, didn't even pick up his plate after eating. The thing is that Vincent and his kids moved into our house like 6 months after he and my mom started dating. 6 months. And they got married before it had been a year of them being together. I was barely 17 at that point, and I remember thinking, this is too fast. But every time I tried to tell my mom something, she'd cut me off with a, "You're too young to understand," or "Vincent is the best thing that's happened to me in years." So I basically shut up and tried to adapt, even though everything in me was screaming that this was going to end badly. The first few months were weird, but tolerable. Vincent didn't work. He said he was looking for something worth his time, which basically meant he spent his time on the couch watching TV while my mom worked double shifts. Lindsay and Nathan started at my school, and suddenly my mom was super involved in their lives, like going to all their school activities, buying them new clothes every month, taking them to the movies, and I was there thinking, wait, when was the last time you did anything like that for me? But I felt guilty for even thinking it because we were supposed to be a family now. You know what I mean? And then the favoritism started, but like, super obvious. Lindsay turned 16 like 6 months after they moved in, and my mom threw her this huge party, like with a DJ. Elaborate decorations, they invited like 50 people, and they gave her a new iPad and a bunch of brand name clothes. I turned 18 2 months later, and my gift was a set of bathroom towels. Towels. And when I looked at my mom with a seriously face, she just said, "Well, you're an adult now. You need practical things." Vincent was there smiling like everything was completely normal, and Lindsay didn't even try to hide her smug smile. But the worst part, what really hurt me to my core, was when they converted my bedroom into a study space for Lindsay. My bedroom. The room where I'd grown up, where I had all my memories, my posters, my stuff. One day, I came home from school and Vincent was taking my things out, putting them in boxes, and he told me I'd be moving to the tiny guest room that was basically the size of a closet. I told him no. That was my room. And he looked at me with that condescending face and said, "Lindsay needs a quiet place to study. It's her senior year. She needs to focus on her grades." What about me? I was also in my senior year. But that didn't matter, apparently. I went to my mom crying, like really devastated, and she just sighed and said, "Leah, I need you to be more understanding. We're trying to form a family here." And that's when I realized I wasn't her priority anymore. I wasn't even in the top 3. I moved to that little room that same day and basically stopped talking to everyone except when it was absolutely necessary. I spent all my free time at the library or at my cousin Kendra's house, who was like 10 years older than me and was the only person who seemed to understand what was happening. Kendra was incredible during all that time, honestly. She listened to me, let me stay at her apartment on weekends, made me feel like I wasn't crazy for being angry. She clearly saw what was happening, how Vincent was manipulating my mom, how my mom was choosing her new family over me. My uncle Joseph, Kendra's dad, also tried to talk to my mom a couple of times, but she didn't want to listen. She was completely blind to what Vincent was doing. And then we get to the event that basically destroyed everything. I was 18, had just graduated from high school, and I was super excited because I was finally going to go to college. I'd worked part-time throughout my entire senior year, saving to supplement the college fund my mom had been keeping for me since I was little. It was money my grandmother had left me before she died, like $6,500, that my mom had put in an account in my name. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover my first year at community college and maybe part of the second. I went to the bank to check the account because I wanted to start making tuition payments, get myself organized, and the lady at the bank looked at me with a confused face and said, the account was at zero. Zero. I told her there had to be a mistake, that there were supposed to be over $6,000 there, and she checked everything, and confirmed that the money had been withdrawn in several transactions over the last 8 months. As the last 8 months. Since Vincent and his kids moved in, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe right. I asked her for the transaction records, and all of them, absolutely all of them, were authorized by my mom. My mom. The person who was supposed to protect me, who was supposed to look out for my future. I left the bank shaking, literally shaking with rage and pain, and drove straight to the house. Vincent was on the couch as usual, and Lindsay was in my old room. Her study space, and my mom had just gotten home from her shift. I confronted her right there, in the living room, with Vincent listening to everything. I said, Mom, where's my money? Where's my $6,500? And she didn't even try to deny it. She went pale, looked at Vincent, and then looked at me and said, Leah, we needed that money. Lindsay and Nathan had school expenses. Vincent needed to fix his car. We had to pay some overdue bills. And I was standing there thinking, seriously? You seriously just said that? I yelled at her. That was my money. It was for my college. It was the only thing my grandmother left me. And she had the audacity to tell me, we all have to make sacrifices in this family. We all have to contribute. Vincent got into the conversation, getting up from the couch with that tough guy attitude, and told me to stop being dramatic, that my mom had made the right decision for the good of the family, that I was selfish for thinking only about myself. Selfish. He called me selfish for wanting the money my grandmother had left me for my education. In that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was absolute clarity. These people weren't my family. My mom had chosen, and she didn't choose me. I told my mom I was never going to forgive her for this, that she had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and she started crying, saying, I'd understand when I was older that these things are complicated. But there was nothing complicated about this. She stole my future to please a manipulative man and spoil his kids. I went up to that little room, put all my clothes and important stuff in 2 suitcases, and called Kendra. She picked me up like an hour later, and I moved in with her that same night. I never set foot in that house again. The next few months were brutal, I'm not going to lie. I was angry all the time. I'd cry when I thought no one was watching. I felt betrayed and abandoned. But Kendra was my salvation. She let me stay on her couch while I looked for work, and when I finally got 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop and another as a waitress at a restaurant, I started paying rent. I worked like 50 to 60 hours a week, saved every penny I could, and enrolled in night classes at community college. It was exhausting. I'd literally collapse into bed every night, but I also felt proud. I was doing it alone, without anyone's help, and nobody could take that away from me. My mom tried to contact me a couple of times, those first months, calls, messages, but I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to her. My uncle Joseph also called me saying my mom was sorry, that she wanted to fix things, but I told him that if she was so sorry, she should give me my money back. Obviously, that never happened. Kendra told me it was my decision whether I wanted to forgive her or not, that she'd support me no matter what, and that meant everything to me. Having at least one person in your corner when you feel like the whole world turned its back on you is enough to keep going. Like 2 years passed like that. I kept working like crazy, taking classes, saving. I managed to transfer to a real university when I was 20, and even though I had to take out student loans, I'd also saved enough to cover part of the tuition. I moved into a shared apartment near campus with two roommates who were pretty decent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building a life that was truly mine. It wasn't easy. I was still working part-time while studying full-time, but there was something liberating about knowing that everything I had, every achievement, was the result of my own effort. During that time, I basically didn't hear anything from my mom. I think she realized I was serious when I said I didn't want to know anything about her. Sometimes I felt guilty. You know, like thinking maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should at least answer her messages. But then I'd remember how I felt that day at the bank. How I felt when they told me I had no money for college. And the guilt would disappear. She made her choice. I was just living with the consequences of her actions, just like she'd have to live with hers. I graduated when I was 23, with honors too, and got a job in marketing like 3 weeks later. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid well, had benefits, and allowed me to move into my own studio. All mine. The day I signed the lease, I started crying in the car because I couldn't believe I'd done it. I'd gone from sleeping on my cousin's couch, working 2 jobs and attending night classes, to having my own place, my career, my life. And I did it completely alone, without a penny from my mom or Vincent. And then, when I was 24, like 6 months ago, my mom contacted me again. But this time it wasn't to apologize or try to reconnect. Oh no. This time she wanted money. She sent me a long message, like super casual, as if years hadn't passed without us talking, telling me that Lindsay had moved into an apartment for college and they needed help paying the rent. That if I could contribute like $1,000 to $1,500 monthly because, and I quote, "it would be fair for you to help since you're part of the family." I read that message like 5 times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Seriously? Seriously? This woman stole my college fund to pay for her stepkids' expenses, didn't talk to me for years, and now wanted me to pay for Lindsay's apartment? The level of audacity was impressive. Honestly, I responded with a very simple message. No. Never. Find another way to pay for your decisions. And I blocked her on all social media, on WhatsApp, everywhere. I thought that was the end of it all. But like a week later, I got a call from Vincent. Vincent. The guy had the audacity to call my number, which I don't even know how he got, to tell me I was a horrible daughter, that my mom had done so much for me, that the least I could do was help with Lindsay. And that's when I exploded. I told him exactly what I thought, that he was a manipulator, a freeloader, that he'd destroyed the relationship between my mom and me, that he'd stolen my money to maintain his lazy lifestyle. I told him Lindsay was his problem, not mine, and that if he wanted to pay for her apartment, he should get a real job for the first time in his life. He got furious, started yelling at me, threatening me, with vague things like, "You're going to regret this," or "You'll see what's coming." But I just laughed and hung up on him. Then I blocked his number too. Kendra was proud of me when I told her. She said it was exactly what that guy deserved to hear. My Uncle Joseph also supported me, though he warned me that Vincent would probably try to manipulate my mom to pressure me more. He was right. What happened next was almost poetic in its irony. Apparently, after I refused to pay, Vincent gave my mom an ultimatum. Either she found the money to pay for Lindsay's apartment, or he was leaving. And my mom, still completely under his control, started taking money out of her retirement savings to pay for that apartment. Her retirement savings. The money she'd worked decades to save up. All to keep Vincent and his kids happy. And Vincent still didn't work, obviously. He kept living his best life while my mom killed herself working and emptying her accounts. This went on for like 4 months, until, basically, my mom had no more money to give him. And you know what Vincent did? He left anyway. He left her. But he didn't just leave, he also took half of what was left in the joint accounts they had and her car. He left her without transportation, without savings, without anything. I found out about all this because my mom wrote to me from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. The message was long, full of apologies, admitting she'd been blind, that Vincent had manipulated her, that she regretted everything she did to me, especially the money thing. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but that she needed me to know the truth, that she finally saw things clearly, that I was always right about Vincent, and that she should have listened to me from the beginning. I didn't respond right away. I spent like 2 weeks processing everything, talking it over with Kendra, thinking about what I wanted to do. Part of me felt satisfaction, like a kind of karmic justice, because Vincent finally showed his true face, and my mom had to face the consequences of having chosen that guy over her own daughter. But another part of me, a smaller part I didn't want to admit, felt sorry for her. Not sorry in the sense that I wanted to help her financially or anything like that, but a sadness at seeing how she'd destroyed her own life for a man who never valued her. I finally responded and agreed to see her, but only in a public place. We met at a coffee shop near my work, and when I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired, defeated. She sat across from me, and before I could say anything, she said, "I'm sorry, Leah. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for stealing your money. I'm sorry for replacing you with Vincent and his kids. I'm sorry for not being the mother you deserved." She started crying right there in the coffee shop, and I just sat there not knowing what to say. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that she needed to understand something. The damage was already done. I couldn't just forgive and forget like nothing had happened. She stole my future, destroyed our relationship, and chose strangers over me over and over again. I told her that maybe someday we could have some kind of relationship, but that it was going to take time, a lot of time, and that it would never be like before. She understood, or at least said she understood, and told me she'd respect my space and my time. We've seen each other a couple of times since then, but keeping a lot of distance. They're like 1-hour meetings at coffee shops, superficial conversations, basic updates about our lives. She's working on rebuilding her life, living in a small apartment, trying to save for her retirement again. Lindsay and Nathan basically abandoned her too once Vincent left, because it turns out they were only there for the money and comfort. What a surprise. I don't know if I'll ever completely forgive her. Sometimes I think maybe with time, but other times, I remember that day at the bank. I remember how I felt when I lost my bedroom, when they called me selfish for wanting my own money, and the anger comes back. What I do know is that I'm proud of the person I became despite everything. I built my life from scratch, without help from anyone except Kendra. And now I have my career, my apartment, my independence, and nobody can take that away from me. Last week, my mom asked me if we could have dinner together on Thanksgiving. I told her I'd think about it. The truth is, I'll probably spend that day with Kendra and her family, the people who were really there when I needed them. Maybe someday things will change. Maybe someday I'll be able to see my mom and not feel that knot in my stomach, that mix of anger and sadness. But today is not that day, and that's okay. I'm focused on my own life, on my own future, and that's enough for now.